Cool. So welcome to the discussion around mass integration at group level. What I want to do, I don't really want to talk through the entire issue. It's a really big epic, but let me give you a high level view of what the goal here was and what the purpose and background for it is. So integration being our thing, right, is the thing that ecosystem owns. As I've been reviewing this concept, we've got a number of requests from users. We have a bunch of issues open that talk about wanting to see integration at a group level for things like Mattermost. Like there's a group level integration for Mattermost issue. There's one for Slack. There's one for Jira. There's one for Jenkins. Like there are a bunch of these individual issues. And then additionally, there have been a handful of requests off and on for integrations at the instance level, which is a thing that we haven't even played with. Additionally, we have this concept called service templates. Service templates confuse the snot out of our users. I've talked to a bunch of users who don't understand what they are. There are also a lot of people who are unable to use them because they're only available on self-hosted. They're not available for GitLab.com because they're an admin-only feature. So all of the goodness that you can get out of service templates just doesn't count if you're on GitLab.com. So there have been some requests for bringing service templates up to the group level, right, from instance to group. So there are all of these different requests, and I've been trying to rationalize and wrap my head around how do we align all of these concepts? How do we make it easier and more sensible for the user? And how can we make everything more, what's the word I'm looking for? More standardized in functionality, so that if someone is used to integrating one thing, right? So they've already set up a Slack integration once. I'd like it so that if they decide to create a group with a bunch of projects in it, they already know how to do that integration because they've done it once before at the project level, right? So like making all of those things align from user experience standpoint, I think adds a ton of benefit. I think the other thing that we can realize out of this is if we better align the functionality with this feature across these different chunks of uses, it'll be easier for us to stand this up in the future. There are a couple of issues that are open right now around Project Service X and Project Service Y don't conform exactly the way the other project services do, right? So I kind of view this as another effort to like, let's really dig into how do these services work at all of these different levels. And while I'm not saying we don't need to do, we're GitLab, we don't waterfall here, right? So we don't want to set up a 3-year roadmap for how to fix this, but I think we do need to set up some kind of a North Star vision for this is where we want to head over the next few years. And then we can kind of, once we have that set and we understand like where we're driving towards, then we can iteratively add things and change things as over the next few quarters and years. So that's the context for why I wrote this. I will say in advance, it's incomplete in that I did the integrations part of it. I think there needs to be additional description around how to handle service templates. I think there needs to be an additional description around how to handle webhooks, because those are discrete things. But what I wanted to do, once we had decided to have this conversation, I wanted to kind of wait and just see what, like, get a pulse check on how do we feel about the integrations at the group level and instance level. And then given that feedback, then I can go back through and add the description around what do service templates look like and what do webhooks look like. Because I'd also like them aligned in the same way, but I didn't want to triple the amount of content when we hadn't even discussed the first part. So there's where I am at the high level. Before I dig into kind of what is in that issue and kind of review it briefly, do we have any questions around the background that I can answer or anything we'd like to talk about before I dive in?
I don't know if you'll go into this more, but like a little bit of a TLDR on service templates might be helpful.
Just
But
add, like
maybe
what service templates are?
yeah.
Okay, so service templates are like a project service. So a project service, by the way, and I have a note in there, like my first note on there is, it's been brought up a few times that maybe we should consider renaming project services to just integrations because that's confusing. So anyway, project services are integrations. That's how we integrate with things. A service template is like a project service. It's stored at the instance level. And when you have a service template created for, let's say, Slack, all new projects from that point forward will start with that service template as the default. Like it becomes a default value. The confusing thing for some people around it is, not to dive too far into it, but part of the problems with it today are it only applies to new projects. It doesn't retroactively apply. So if I need to change those settings on a bunch of stuff, changing the project service does not help. I still have to go back and change all of those individual integrations. It also, again, is only available to users of self-hosted GitLab because it's an admin feature. Anything at the instance level is unavailable to GitLab.com users, right? Which is a significant chunk of our user base. The majority of them are on self-hosted, but there are still a lot of users on GitLab.com, and we are starting to see some people wanting to migrate towards the SaaS service. So we need to make sure that functionality is not locked to self-hosted only. That is pretty painful. Does that help?
Yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else before I kind of dive in?
I also have like a small question.
Shoot.
In what scenario will like a user use service templates on GitLab.com? Like, so as far as I know, like the pricing model is like within one group, right? You own one group, which is like usually one company, and you can configure group templates there. I mean, group services. So why would you need like service templates? Is it to manage like multiple groups?
Now I'm gonna have to double check myself. There are no group level service templates today.
Yeah, me neither.
But they're like group services, right?
Oh, the group integration. Yeah, so there are a couple of group integrations, but they're not. They are not the same as the project services. So one of my goals here is to align those. Like what I'd really like to see in some amount of time. Again, I don't want a waterfall, right? Like we're not going to say this is what I expect in a year, right? But what I do want to see is we need to better align what you can do with a group and with a project, because I think the user assumption is there's no reason, and I agree with this, there's no reason that I can integrate thing X with a project. Why can't I integrate that whole thing with a group? That doesn't make any sense to most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, there are only a couple of things available at the group level. It's basically just webhooks. And
yes, there's definitely webhooks because I worked on them recently.
Right. I think that's it. I think it's just the webhooks at the moment.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So again, like the idea being taking all of those things that are available at the project level and then moving them up to the group level, I think would be really valuable.
Okay.
Cool. So I guess that's a good kickoff point. Let me go ahead and share my screen just so we're all looking at the same thing. Find the right window. Cool. Okay, so again, I don't want to read through this line by line, but I'm going to kind of like the key points that we have in this issue and the key things that I'm thinking about. And then what I want to do is let me kind of quickly go through that, and then let's kick it over to discussion because I really want feedback. I really want to make sure. But I know Libor's brand new, and Eileen hasn't been super looped into all of these discussions, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the idea here is today we have integrations that work on a per project basis. That's it. The goal of this overall vision is to take that same functionality, move it up a level to the group, and then move it up a level to the instance. And the advantage here is if you've got an instance with 15,000 integrations, this now of say Slack, right? Like I've integrated 15,000 projects with Slack. Today, that means you have to go manually configure that 15,000 times. By adding instance level integration, I can do it once, which is huge. For users of GitLab.com, maybe I still have 15,000 projects, but they're spread across 20 different groups. Now I only have to integrate it 20 times instead of having to integrate it 15,000. Additionally, beyond just the creation of the integration, we've got some customers who do things that are crazy, like rotating passwords. I know it's nutty, but if you rotate your password, you have to go change that password 15,000 times, right? So that's a really big pain point, especially for larger customers. And as part of enablement, that's our whole goal, is to support these larger installations. So what I want to do is take that and migrate it up to those two other concepts. And then I also want to create an inheritance concept. So, and I know I really want to talk to you more about this, Arturo. Like we talked a little bit of an issue, but I really like the idea of having an inheritance model. So if something is at the instance level, right? Like I can set a value at the instance level, and then it gets inherited up to the final integration. So what that means is I can set a default value at the instance level, and every project on that instance will retain that value. But then I could instead set an additional value at the group level. So in this instance, right, I've got a value set at the instance level. I've set my Slack username or whatever, my Slack API endpoint. At the group, I'm changing it. So then the actual project itself will reflect the lower level value. And the idea here being that this kind of cascading inheritance allows these users to set the control as granularly as they need to, because you can set it at any level and then it will automatically populate to everything below it. And then I think we also have some descriptions in here. I've also got descriptions where you can talk about overrides or disabling specific areas. So I could say disable it for a whole group or disable it for specific projects. So that's kind of the high level vision. Is there anything I can dive into further specifically, or can I kind of leave it there?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So a project belongs to a group, and a group belongs to an instance, right? But we don't have like a group belongs to another group that belongs to another group.
There are subgroups, yes.
There are subgroups. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that is. Yep. Here, I'll just link to the docs.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I lost our agenda again. Okay, here.
So, I was thinking about how to implement all of this and how to transition from the current model that we have right now into this, and maybe I can also share my screen because
let's do it.
I still need to write this, like click on comment here. Can you see my screen here? Yes. With this comment that like is that this proposal. So my idea here is basically that the service templates will become instance level configuration. And then what we can do is I specify more or less what we need to do, you know, like introduce new field to capture that, what is the configuration level, project, group, or the instance level, and then identify what are the services that are templates, and then set them as instance configuration. And then we can, as you say, like try to find the project level configuration or the instance level configuration. So this one is going to be what you write here. You have this example is, we have this or this, right?
Yeah.
So for me, this is like the first iteration, you know, like having just instance level and then having the project level. And then we have to introduce, I'm going to skip this because this is if we allow override or not, you know, but this is a separate thing, but then we can introduce the group level configuration. So basically what we are going to do is to check if we have project level or group level or instance level. But the problem here is, you know, having subgroups, then I need to track what groups belong to what other group. So it's not going to be like that straightforward in this case. To know exactly, like the whole tree.
Right.
But this is like a very high level, about how we can approach this from more like the different steps. So, and I still need to investigate a few things, like, for example, how works the API access level, and if we can create all of this, not with the UI, with the API.
Yeah.
And also what happened with some non-encrypted tokens that we have for some services. And maybe we want to encrypt this before we start to introduce more configurations and services that then we have to migrate and to encrypt.
Sure. This is great. Please submit that comment. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, I can click right now and then let's do it.
Okay, so what I want to do is, this is great. I also thank you for calling out the high-level overview of feature and consistency on UX. Libor, this is going to be huge for you. I think, and again, like I've told you before, please don't dive in tomorrow, right? But I think there is a ton of concern that I have around creating cognitive overhead between, like, I have an instance setting that's been set, it's being inherited by the project. How do we appropriately show that, right? How do we show where you're getting that data from? Or what if we have, like, worst case scenario? Okay, so worst case scenario is there is a default value set at the instance. There's a default value that's set at the group that's overriding that. There's another default value that's being overridden by my subgroup. And then I'm overriding all of them and I'm setting my own custom value. Like, how do we show, like, what do we have to display? Do we only show the level above us? Do we show all of those concerns? Like, how do we think about that so it's not confusing to the user? The worst possible situation is the user opens it up and sees, like, oh, I have a thing configured. I have an integration set. Where does any of this come from? And then they, like, nuke it and, set their own custom thing, right? So, like, we need to have a lot of consideration around how are we displaying this to the user? How are we informing them where this data is coming from? How do we inform them what their options are? So there's a lot of work to be done on that front. So I'm really glad Arturo called that out specifically. Cool. Look, this was a fairly short meeting. We have 3 minutes. Are there any other things any other questions? Anything else?
Yeah, I just have one point that I want to get clarified, because we've kind of gone back and forth about it a little bit. So so in Arturo's proposal there, we're changing service templates to be instance level configuration, which makes sense. But I think in some conversations we've had, Patrick, we've also talked about, like, maybe there still is a role for service templates to be their own thing. And I just want to sort of pick at that and just see, like, is that the case? Or do we want to try to simplify things and just make service templates go away and make that instance level configuration?
So here's my take. I'd love to hear other people's opinions. I think we should focus today on integrations and just leave service templates alone. I think if we focus on integrations, get the project integrations lined up, get the group level integrations lined up, get instance level integrations lined up, then let's reevaluate how valuable are service templates. I think one possibility, I don't want to call this canonical, this is not my plan, but one possibility is, once we've got all of that taken care of, what service templates could be is, maybe I can create as many service templates as I want at any one of those levels, right? Or at instance and group, right? I could say I have 5 Jira instances. So I'm going to set up 5 service templates for Jira. I'm going to put them at the instance level so that a project owner or a group owner can just go, like, oh yeah, that's the one I want. Like, it's kind of like how we do, we have templates for issues, right? And templates for MRs. It kind of becomes like that, where you could say, I want to create an integration, let me pull from a template. Instead of an inheritance, it's now just a thing that is out there that I can choose from if I want.
Yeah, so I think the potential conflict I see with that is this idea of, like, project services taking the override value. So if I'm understanding correctly, if we still have this concept of service templates, then we're essentially, when we create a new project, we're not, we are seeding it with the values at the project level from that template, so that it's not
Right.
inheriting from the group or instance level then. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So it would mean that we're going to change the way service templates work slightly. I think the reason that this approach works today is since service templates only apply to new projects, it would be the migration effort would be as simple as telling customers, okay, so this is the new thing. What you'll do is you'll add your integration at the service level or the group level, turn off that service template, and then any projects that you don't want those old values to apply to, you just go delete those values in there. And like you'll now just use the inherited value.
So I think that we can transition from templates to instance level configuration because by default, unless you activate something like a configuration, is deactivated. So let's say that I want to create let's say that I have a service template right now, right? And we transfer that into instance level configuration. So now that means that is going to apply to any project that is not, it doesn't have any configuration, is going to apply to them. But for me, the thing is that you need to go to the integration and activate that integration to start to work with the integration. So even that is the instance level configuration is in place, is not active for anything unless you go and you activate that thing. You know, so you can transition from that because by default everything is turned off. So then if you want to have it, then you create a new project and you can say, you know, like use my inherit values coming from the group or from the instance, or I can write my own properties at the project level. So I think that for that reason, I think that we can transition in that place. I don't like the idea to have two different things, you know, like that then when we create a new project, that, you know, is coming from the templates, is coming from the instance level configuration, like it's going to be like worse for the users that just having a simple model that now is coming from here, but is disabled by default.
Yeah, I'm if we can transition service templates to being our instance level integration, I think that would be huge. And then I think it can be let's revisit that concept later. Like I think that what we're talking about here is a much more powerful tool. And maybe later, if it would be valuable to have templates, like great, let's revisit that at a later date. Like I think that the ability to set defaults is a much more powerful and much more useful to our users. Sorry, Justin, you were going to say something, and also we're at time here, y'all. So please, Justin, what do you got?
I was just going to say that the concept of like templates, right? Sounds like quite familiar with like apps. I'm not sure if you know like Slack apps, right? You can install an app and you can configure it. So it sounds something like it. So maybe eventually it can become something like that. Just a thought, but yeah, like we can think about it later.
Okay. Well, so we are at time. Please leave any further feedback in comments on that issue. Arturo, thank you for leaving that awesome review of what needs to get done. The next step is please help me figure out how we can break this into small issues that we can start scheduling. Because I think we can kind of, given that we're all on the same page, I think we can now break out into a couple separate threads. I think that Libor and myself can start working on creating some mock-ups for what these things are going to look like on the UI. And I think we can start figuring out how we're going to refactor those services. And I guess we didn't get to talk about it. One thing that we do need to note, I do think it makes sense to probably rename it from project service if it's going to apply at the group level, it doesn't make any sense to call it a project service. So it's something to think about. If anybody has a better suggestion than integration, that's fine, but I think we probably need to look at refactoring that. Any last second additions before we drop? Cool. Well, thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to your feedback. That's good. Everybody have a good one.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.